UK, didn't come from much, didn't have much, but had a good enough standard education, didn't have to pay for that education. And that allowed me to go into university and go on to get a job in finance. I came to Nigeria and I realized that children who didn't necessarily have that start or came from families that didn't have much couldn't necessarily use education to do that. At that point, we were realizing we could see the trends in the way in which the world is moving. The kind of school I would want my children to go to didn't exist. You know, we've sort of lost our way a bit at the moment in Nigeria. And it's like, how do we come together as a community of school leaders, educators, policymakers? We all have a stake in this. It's the most important thing for any country to figure out and get its education system right.
Damilola Okonkwo, founder of Key Academy, Africa's first 100% project-based school. Dami has a deep commitment to reimagining education for the 21st century. She leads a bold, learner-centered movement that places real-world learning, creativity, and systems thinking at the heart of school experience. Under her leadership, Key Academy has gained national and international recognition for its innovative approach. Most recently, being named a top 10 finalists in the 2025 World's Best School Prize for Innovation, the first school in West Africa to receive this honor. Welcome, Dami.
Thank you.
Finally, I can get to speak to you.
I know. Thank you
I'm
so
so
much.
excited to have you here. You know, I'm a big fan and follower because, of course, we're kind of in the same realm of changing the way schooling and learning is done in Nigeria, focusing on 21st century learning and teaching. So I usually like to start my conversations with what childhood experiences were like, principally, because I believe experiences shape our lives and livelihoods for the good or otherwise. So I know you were born in Nigeria.
Yes.
But then you moved to the UK when you were 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go from there. Do you have any memory at all? I know 3 is you know, really young.
3 is really young.
Yeah.
I was born in Ibadan. And I remember saying to my mom, I must have been in my late teens, and I said, you know, did we live in a house that was on stilts? And she said, yeah, we did. And she was surprised that I remembered this one thing or had this one recollection. Now, I can't remember where it's come from or how, but that's the one thing I remember. I was really young, so I don't really remember much. And then when we moved to the UK, unlike other friends that I had who would come back and forth, we didn't actually come back and forth. So I was in the UK and I didn't come back to Nigeria until I was in my sort of mid-20s. I don't really have much sort of childhood memories or even memories growing up of actually physically being in Nigeria. But then because I grew up within a Nigerian household and in a community surrounded by Nigerians, it didn't feel like I didn't. So I was connected to Nigerians, but not necessarily the country.
It was Little Nigeria in London.
Yes,
almost.
South London as well.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I always say that your world is reflective of how you're raised. So in terms of cultural norms and traditions, was that very Nigerian at home? But then when you stepped out of your house, you were living in a different culture and way of living.
That's a good question. I think it depended which room I stepped into. So home was Nigerian, church was Nigerian, other environments that I was in was quite Nigerian, but then school didn't feel very Nigerian. But because I grew up in South London, the part of South London I grew up in, which was Brixton, was predominantly Caribbeans and West Africans. So even a lot of my friends and just people that I would interact with were either Nigerians or from West Africa. So it felt like there was a mix, and we all had sort of shared values in terms of how our parents were raising us, expectations. Majority of us were first generation immigrants. So our parents didn't grow up in the environment we were all growing up in, and that came with its own challenges and ways we had to navigate that as well. So I think it really depends what room I was in that determined what it felt like.
So were there lots of tensions though? Because I was born in Nigeria, but then I left Nigeria to go to school when I was 13. And I guess I grew up in the UK, but my ties were always here because my family was here. But getting to university, I met a lot of, you know, first generation immigrants as well, African or Nigerian. And I always felt that there was some sort of tension, you know, culturally and tradition-wise. And I remember a friend of mine specifically, I think we were talking about something about mom or whatever, and she said, you know, she was having this contention that, oh, her mom said to do this and this one and that. And to her, she was like, I don't see a reason why I should. Or she had a counter opinion. And I said, oh no, I think you have to do what
your mom said.
And she was like, why? I don't think so. I said, but she's your mom. So for us, it was like growing up with, I made you and I can take you out of this world kind of mentality. And mothers is like, it's your mom. There's no other reason, whether she's right or wrong. So I felt that often with like the UK born or UK raised Nigerian or Africans, that tension sometimes at home. Did you experience that, and how did you cope?
Not at all. It wouldn't fly in my home.
Exactly.
It wouldn't fly in my home at all. I always say to people that my mum, my dad, they were very much Nigerian. So it was, it was interesting. I think they're almost doing what I'm doing now, which is raising children in the country you didn't grow up in. So you often raise them with the values that you are familiar with. So regardless of whether or not we were in the UK, this is how they're going to raise us. As you said, respect, how you treat elders, how you speak to elders, how you address people, regardless of who they are, where they're from. So we were raised with all of those traditional values and expectations. I think the difference would have just been, maybe the influence of friendships. I felt very Nigerian. I was raised in a Nigerian home. I was raised with values that probably you too were raised with as well. But where there was the kind of dynamic was, how does that translate in friendship groups, in relationships and things like that? Because it didn't feel necessary that it did often translate into those worlds. And you were trying to figure it out. So, at home, we were like this. At church, we were like this. When we go out to the cinema or wherever we went as young teenagers, I was like this. I felt like there was a different version of me showing up in these different environments.
So learning-wise, would you say you were an all-rounder, or it was already apparent to you the pathway? Or I'll ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did you know?
As a kid, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I enjoyed. I knew what I was good at. I was really good at art. I was really good at more of the creative side of things, actually, than the academic side of things. I worked really hard, so it meant that I got really good results and things in academic subjects as well, so traditional academic subjects like maths and science and things like that. But I really enjoy the creative stuff. I really enjoy things like art.
So why didn't you go down that pathway? Is it because we're Nigerians?
You also ask that question yourself.
Art's gay.
Exactly. Art, nah. And that's why I thought I could marry it with being a sort of computer games animator, designer, because I thought that could bring in my interest with art. But yeah, it was just not to be honest with you, my parents didn't even have to tell me. It just, when you're a first generation immigrant, the focus is survival, right? You are looking to, get the best grades, get into the best university and get the best job. That was the MO. That's what we were working towards. You didn't even have to be told that. That's what you wanted to achieve and wanted to do. Or definitely me anyway, sorry. Art just didn't really factor into that,
You have to do a professional
program. What roles are people going into? They're doctors and lawyers and accountants and engineers, exactly. So you had to kind of fit into there some way, somehow, And then when finance was added to that bucket list and, it started to be one of those industries that parents were like, okay, I can see you also doing that. Then, and others before me were also going into those industries. And you realized, they paid really well. They offered great graduate programs. For me, it made sense. It really did.
So let's fast track to moving back to Nigeria for someone who technically has never lived here.
Never lived here.
So what made you jackpot? Or
the other way.
Jackpot out of the UK? What was the draw to this continent and place that you'd never lived in?
What it was, if I'm honest, is that my husband...
so it was a man.
Yeah, I was married to him. It wasn't for a man. We're already married. But he had got a job for a private equity company in Nigeria. Okay. And at the time I was working with JP Morgan in London, and we momentarily sort of explored me moving to Nigeria with the company. We didn't have an asset management presence in Nigeria, but it was something we explored to see if it would work. It didn't end up working in the end. And then I was headhunted by First Bank's asset management division. So they were growing their asset management division and they were looking for someone to come in and head up strategy. So it made sense because my husband he'd got this job in Nigeria. We wanted to obviously be working together. The plan was to only be here for a few years, test the waters, see how we felt, make good money, and take it from there. Really, that was the plan. We actually had a property in the UK which we rented out because we thought we'd be back. We just fell in love with Nigeria. We fell in love with Lagos.
So again, transitioning to a new country, new environment. So how did the education thing come into play? What was the inspiration, or no? What was the irritation that got you into education?
I think for me, one of the things I know, it didn't really necessarily get me into education immediately, but it got me sort of interested in how we were delivering education in Nigeria and what it looked like, right? So as I mentioned before, I was a first generation Nigerian immigrant in the UK. And one of the things that my public, equivalent of a government school education did is it allowed me to climb up the social mobility ladder. And I could see that. So for me, it was in the UK, didn't come from much, didn't have much, but had a good enough standard education, didn't have to pay for that education. And that allowed me to go on to university and go on to get a job in finance. Then I came to Nigeria and I realized that children who didn't necessarily have that start or came from families that didn't have much couldn't necessarily use education to do that. And so there were a number of issues and challenges in the way in which we're not only educating children, but also access to quality education. That was the first time I started looking at education, not necessarily because I wanted to do anything in education, but it kind of stood out to me that this is different, this stands out. I realized that when we wanted to start a family, that we just didn't want our children to just go to a conventional school. At that point, we were realizing we could see the trends in the way in which the world was moving, the fact that technology was becoming adopted at such a fast pace, the fact that things were changing and yet the education system wasn't changing to meet that demand, the fact that the world was needing skills schools just were not providing. So for me, it's really apparent that the kind of school I would want my children to go to didn't exist. So my plan originally was to home educate them, and that's what I wanted to do. Once I started that journey, I also realized that's quite difficult in Nigeria. Not because it doesn't exist. We do actually have home education communities, but it's a bit fragmented. And I know I didn't want an education for my children where they would be at home and just doing school at home. I wanted an education that allowed them to be in their environment, their community.
So did they actually go to school at all? Did they
So
attend
by the time I
school?
started the school, they were of quote unquote school age.
Okay then.
Do you see what I mean? So they did actually start going to school.
Yeah, okay.
But in terms of when they didn't go to a conventional nursery, for example. I realized that, home educating in Nigeria is quite difficult. So I started a mother-baby group with another mum. And we essentially invited, similar to, I'm sure if you see them around, I mean, they have them a lot in other parts of the world, but I've seen a few here as well, where you bring sort of young mums, or not necessarily young mums, but just mums with young children. They come, they sort of play-based immersion activities with their children, very kind of sensory-based and things like that. And we did that for a couple of years, and then our children grew up. And sort of what's next? Because it's now time for them to go to school. They're now of school age, sort of 3, 4. Here we go to, some of the children start school a lot earlier. So sort of 3, 4, 5 years old, what do we do? And then I remember one mum mentioning, why don't you transition this into a school? School? Me? How am I going to do it? I don't know. I'm finance. I'm a new mum.
Yeah, exactly.
And but that was the seed that was sown. And that's where I started doing a lot of research into, what would a 21st century school look like in Lagos, Nigeria? And what, attributes would that school need to be successful? And how do we honor the country in which we're in and celebrate culture whilst delivering this phenomenal 21st century style of learning? And that's where the journey began. I started essentially building this school and designing it and thinking about what it looked like and doing a lot of research into what other schools like ours look like in other parts of the world, visiting some of these schools as well. Started developing a plan, a design for what our school would look like. And that's essentially how Key Academy was born.
Key Academy is a project-based school, 100% project-based. Why did you decide on that particular pathway, and how is it different to a Montessori model?
Okay, so what you find so I'll start with the first question. Why did we decide this pathway? We were looking for an educational model that better prepared children for the world in which they're growing up in. but then also allowed them to find solutions to the problems that we had in Nigeria. And I feel sometimes the way in which we're educating our children, we're not necessarily educating them to solve our local problems. I couldn't quite understand why that was. I think about some of the sort of private schools, international schools, it's often preparing them for a global stage that leaves behind the country in which they come from and doesn't necessarily celebrate that. I was thinking about like, what would that look like? How do you build a school centered on pedagogy that really helped children develop skills that prepared them for the world in which they were growing up in, that allowed them to be global citizens, but while firmly rooted in Nigeria. And the more and more I came across the project-based model for learning, and the more schools that I visited that adopted this, for me, it made so much sense. When I think about what we're doing at Key, I always say that we take almost the best bits from all of the various methodologies and pedagogies out there. The challenges I had in Montessori at the time is the fact that you needed to have all of these Montessori-based resources. And sometimes you don't necessarily have access to these resources or can afford them. So how do you create the same style of learning or achieve the same things with resources that you have at your fingertips? How do you use your environment, things that come naturally or that are, developed or grown or produced naturally in Nigeria? How do you bring that into the education system? So I didn't really want to focus on bringing an existing model to Nigeria because it's worked elsewhere. For me, it was let's start from the ground up and figure out what do we need and what does that look like and build a model based on that.
So, I mean, really, in terms of getting buy-in, this is a complete mindset shift.
Yes.
How did you find that in terms of even reaching out to parents or even convincing them it wasn't just this fancy new age kind of thing? Because
like a trend.
This really, trend. I know one of the values that you have at Key Academy is really, that notion of partnering with parents. How do you even, what were the early days like? Because I know for us, when we started STEM Mets, the early days of trying to even talk about STEM-based education, project-based, experiential learning, hands-on, etc., using creative tools to teach and learn. There was a lot of work that had to be done. How was your experience with that at the time you were starting?
That was when we started, and like, as with anything new, I think it's really important that you share and you bring people on board because it's completely new. So you can't just say, this is it, this is the offering, this is the service, this is the model, come or leave it. We spent a lot of time educating parents and also educating ourselves in terms of how do we actually, how do we get this model across? What does it look like? How do we show parents and, people within our community what 21st century project-based learning looks like in practice? And within our local context as well. So we spent a lot of time in the early days, and we still do now, sharing a lot of what we do and how we do it. We do that with our parents, we do that with others in our community, we do it online as well. So we are very open to sharing all of our activities and sessions and what our classrooms are like and how we train, all of this kind of stuff. It's all online. And that's intentional as well, so that we can actually share all of this information with the aim of inspiring not just parents who may want to enroll their children, but other teachers, other educators, other school owners who want to adopt some of what we're doing in their classrooms as well.
So is that sort of your segue into, social impact of sorts, and also scaling? Because, I was going to ask you, at some point in terms of how do you see this scaling? This concept.
So our vision, our model is never to launch more than one Key Academy. Because even if we were to launch a school like ours in every state in Nigeria, we still would not be able to have deep impact and really reach classrooms and teachers that ordinarily would not have access to this style of learning. So for us, it was always to have one school that was a center of excellence for what we do and demonstrated in practice on a daily basis exactly what this style of learning looks like. Then use technology to codify all that we've been building and developing and iterating over the last 6 years, and use technology to take this style of learning into classrooms by training teachers across the country in 21st century project-based learning. So when we think about scale, it's not to launch 5, 10, 15 Key Academy schools. No, not at all. It's to actually take this style of learning and transform existing classrooms across the country. So I'm very, very passionate about teacher training. I feel that we haven't, as a country, we haven't invested in our teachers enough. We're not supporting them enough. And they literally have our country in their hands. They're raising, they're nurturing, they're leading future generations. And for us, it's important that we continue to invest in them through training.
But that also is a mindset shift in terms of, as a teacher and what I traditionally know as teaching or way to teach children. You're not asking me to kind of think differently.
Yes.
So there's also a buy-in. So they're one of your stakeholders essentially, and so there's an education that needs to happen there.
Yeah.
And I know for you at Key Academy, that's why you describe your educators as co-learners and not teachers. Talk to us a bit about that. Is it just a title, new age title?
A very intentional title.
Yeah.
And for us, it's important not just for the children to see adults as not the kind of custodians of knowledge or sort of sage on the stage, but actually they are constantly learning just like we are. So a child should understand that their teacher, their co-learner is also learning. We're all in this journey together. Learning doesn't stop the moment you finish school, but it's something that you continue to do throughout your whole life. So that's what the name KEY even stands for, is keep educating yourself. So it's an acronym. Keep educating yourself. In that learning is a lifelong journey. And that's where we've sort of taken the name co-learners from. So they are co-learning with the children. Yes, they're supporting them. Yes, they are their teachers, but they are co-learning alongside them as well. You do have to be open-minded. You do have to question a lot. But I'm yet to come across an educator who's seen what we do and not subscribe to it or not understand it, even if it's intriguing or wanting to understand more or having questions. But often when you look at what we do, and if you were to ask the average educator, not just in Nigeria, but anywhere, if you could transform your classroom, if you could do absolutely anything you want to do to your classroom, what would it look like? How would you change learning? What would it feel like for you? I can bet you that a lot of teachers would describe the type of environment and atmosphere that we have at Key Academy. I think often when we see some of our classrooms or we interact with some of our teachers, often the way in which they do things is because that's just the way things are done. That's just the way it's always been. But what we're offering here...
How do they unlearn what has become part of their DNA, because they went to this school that you are trying to challenge the notion of how they've learned. They've gone to university, so the whole, spectrum of education in Nigeria has been based on that and is ingrained in the DNA. How do you see, what Key Academy is doing from the teacher training perspective? What does success look like to you?
For me, success is a collaborative effort. And that's what I would love to see more of in schools in Nigeria. We need to be collaborating. We need to be working together. We need to be sharing best practices. Like, that is what we need to be doing. So when I think about an educator coming into Key Academy, the first thing we do is they have a buddy. They have somebody that they can come to and speak to and share and learn from in their first few months of being at Key. Understanding this new process and this new way of teaching and this culture that is so embracing and, open and, we have a very happy environment, and that is intentional. We have to create a happy learning environment for children. So all of that, can be incredibly new to most people, as you said. If you've been learning a certain way, you've been to a certain university. So we start off with a buddy system, and then we do a lot of training. So training is a fundamental part of the role of a co-learner at Key. So you come in and you train and you learn alongside. There's a lot of shadowing and mentoring and day-to-day ongoing training. There's not one person in our organization that isn't currently taking part in some sort of training course.
So is there a basic timeline for the training entry level?
Yes, so we have onboarding training
at
entry level, and that is a couple of weeks, and they work with individuals across the whole organization supporting their growth, training and development, onboarding, and then there's ongoing training depending on the level at which you're at within the organization. And so we have a training and development lead who supports that whole process. So his role is to support the training and development and learning of our co-learners, not the children. And we ensure that every single person within our organization has a training path. And that, as I said, it continues because you never arrive, you never stop. There's always more to learn. There's always ways in which we can grow and better ourselves, both professionally and personally as well. So for us, it's really, really important that, you know, we're constantly learning and constantly training.
So this is all well and good, Dami.
I feel a question coming along.
Yes. How is this translating though to grassroots and low resource community? As you said, the intention is only ever to have one school.
Yeah.
And yes, I know, you know, you're using technology to scale of sorts in terms of teacher training. But, you know, how will this get to, you know, Jadisola in Alumosho or in Ajegunle?
Yeah, and it's through Jadesola's teacher. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a network, and this is why I talk about community and collaboration. Often, you know, growth comes through not just the work that you're putting in, but also the support network that you have around you. And how can we, through our tech platform, which is called Impact Educators, educators who are impacting what education looks like on a day-to-day basis in Nigeria, how can we use this community to train and support educators within their classroom? So let's just assume there is this teacher, you know, I don't know, somewhere in Ibadan, for example, you know, a bit further away from us in Lagos. And, you know, she comes across what we're doing and she says, you know, I do want to also develop these skills and I want to translate this into my classroom. Because that's another thing, when I think about our platform, we're not just looking at giving you all of the theory, but we're also actually helping you to transition this into your classroom. So what does that look like? So it's not just training, you know, one dimensional and you're continually, you know, just being talked at. Actually, we've got things like, how do you develop a project? What does that look like? What kind of themes do you want to be thinking about? How does that work, or how does that connect with what you are teaching your children?
So are they sort of static resources or self-directed, video-based or apps or?
So it's an app. So it's an app that has, should I say, a training module as part of it. An individual can come in and say, okay, I want to do the foundation course in project-based learning or foundation course in 21st century learning. And then there's another part of this app which also provides lesson plans and frameworks for developing projects and what that looks like. Also gives you ideas, because the plan is to actually develop a bank of projects. So for example, if there's a project that was done at Key Academy and somebody else elsewhere thinks, I'd love to do that similar project in my school, what did this project look like? You can then get the framework and the skeleton for doing that in your school. And in the same way as well, if there's a school somewhere in Abuja and they carried out a project on a certain subject, that same project, if we came across it within the project bank, we can also look at that and say, that'd be fantastic to carry out a similar project like that at Key Academy.
That's really good, actually. I didn't know about that. I'm not sure you publicized that.
We're still in beta phase,
Okay,
so we're still fine-tuning it, and we're still testing it. We're very fortunate, actually, to have the Alliance Manchester Business School supporting us with research to really help refine that model and what it looks like. You should have a version ready to roll out.
That's brilliant. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
I'm looking for maybe you sharing an example. So the idea with Reframe with Adesola is just really thinking differently about how learning is done, and not necessarily school, but learning through people's experiences. So in the 6 years of Key Academy, is there, you know, a moment of failure that you experienced? One, and how did you bounce back, or what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I say it was failure, probably more setback. Setback. So we launched the school, so we started off with a pilot term at another school for one term, which we were just testing. I was really fortunate to be given a space in an existing school by a lady who is phenomenal. She's a mentor to me now. And she allowed me to essentially use a space to just test what this style or form of education would look like. After our pilot term, we then moved to our current campus. And that was in September 2019 that we moved to the current campus. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So you can imagine 6 months after launching and investing heavily into this campus, we were forced to shut for a whole year. We'd only just started building a very small community. I think we had 8 children or so, not many. And we had to go offline. We had to go online. I should say. But you can imagine that our style of learning doesn't really feed into online learning. So my team then, I mean, the team's grown massively now, but back then it was only a few of us, and we had to get our heads together with this new world that we were all in, and we had to figure this out. And we ended up developing a program called Key at Home, which wasn't an online learning program like the majority of schools around the world. What we essentially did is we created a guide, a program for parents to essentially train them in this interim period.
So
to
they
be
were the
co-learners.
co-learners.
Yeah, to be co-learners, to use the resources in their home, to get creative, to come up with really interesting ideas, to really recreate this amazing whole learning experience in their homes during lockdown. To be honest with you, it's from there that the idea for the Impact Educators Network came, because I thought if we could train parents who aren't even teachers, of course we could refine this model and actually develop it for educators as well. So that's where that came from. So from a very dark place where there was a lot of uncertainty, nobody really knew what was going on, were schools ever going to come back, what was happening, we were able to really innovate and come up with some fantastic ideas. And I think even through Key at Home, once we did finally return back to school in I think we actually started again at the beginning of 2021. You know, we actually had more families join us because they loved what they'd seen during that phase when we were offering Key at Home.
So what I see there is adaptability, problem solving, innovation, creativity, those exact skills that, you know, are 21st century skills that you're already trying to
We're living
embed.
it, right?
and I think I find those of us in that, you know, 21st century sector, I think we display that, you know, and we have to, because we're not conventional education models. So I feel that it's almost in our DNA to be able to do that, because we often have to respond to, you know, changing environments and things like that. So how has the response been from existing school owners? Like, who's this new kid on the block with this hat, 21st century, blah, blah, and, you know, who does she think she is?
You're so funny. So this is it, right? We have had some partnerships and relationships with some schools, and it's been great. You know, it really has been. We've had sporting events with some schools. We've collaborated on projects with some schools. We have had like knowledge exchange with some schools. But if I'm honest with you, it's not as collaborative as I'd love it to be. It's not. And I think about the way in which we operate and work. Often it's within our own little silos. And through the work that I'm doing, I definitely want to bring back that collaborative community. It takes a village type spirit into the education space, because we can learn so much from each other. So much I can learn from other people who've been in this industry for years, decades, you know, and vice versa.
And I think even from a research perspective,
absolutely,
being scientists and, you know, evidence-based research, I think there's so much to learn from each other that will better the sector as a whole. I'm a big fan of collaboration, honestly, because I feel that you fly higher 100%. As well. You know, you are sharing skills and knowledge, and together. And I think STEM Mets has just really been a testament, you know, to that power of collaborations for us. And I hear you, because I remember in the early days as well, even before the STEM festival came to being, there was this kind of like tech festival for kids that I used to do, and I would reach out to other people in that space.
Do this together.
And the hostility from some people, and you're thinking, I don't want anything from you. I always say that the pie is big enough for everyone. We just all need to get together so that our impact can be deeper, and our reach can be further. But it's disappointing, but I think you find yourselves, like, you know, I think we actually only met this year, even though we had known of each other. You know, we've known of each other for a long time, and just try and be supportive, you know, as much as possible. But I think it's a shame. And I think if anything, what we with the STEM Africa Fest have been hoping to do is to continue to highlight that power of collaborative, you know, style of engagement.
And I think now more than ever, you know, it's a tough world that we live in right now. We live in very, very uncertain times, I should say, a tough economic climate, and we know that schools are struggling. We know that. So I think now more than ever, we can actually support each other, lean on each other. How do we work together? What does that look like? How do we, because the thing is, I always say, right, even if Key Academy was like the most phenomenal school in Nigeria, that means nothing to the overall Nigerian education space if we're not all rising together. So there's no benefit to me for just Key Academy to emerge, right? It isn't actually, because what we want to be seeing is the education space across the board to be improving and developing and to be rising. You know, I think about during my parents' time and before that, where education in Nigeria was highly respected.
Oh yeah, internationally.
It really genuinely was. And, you know, we've sort of lost our way a bit at the moment in Nigeria. And it's like, how do we come together as a community of school leaders, educators, policymakers? We all have a stake in this. It's the most important thing for any country to figure out and get its education system right.
I feel a seminar coming on.
You think?
Yeah,
Let's do
I feel
this.
a collaborative
Let's do this.
seminar
Let's
or conference of sorts coming on
Yes,
around, you
absolutely.
know, project-based learning and 21st century skills. But listen, so child's, you know, has been at Key Academy since the age of 6. Well, I have to leave soon to go to secondary school. So all these things that have been embedded in my child and has become part of them, they're now going to a regular secondary school.
No, they're not.
Okay.
No, they're not.
I know where I'm going with that.
I know where I'm going with it.
Right. So finish my sentence. What next after primary school?
Absolutely. So in 2027, we're launching our secondary school. And we are going to continue this style of 21st century project-based learning into secondary. And for us, it's really, really important because it's not a model that just exists in primary.
Exactly.
It continues into secondary, and
It's
there are
actually
secondary
lifelong
schools,
learning.
Absolutely. And there are secondary schools across the world who are adopting 21st century project-based learning. And we want to continue doing this. So we plan to go right up until the age of 18, actually, and continue teaching children in this style of learning.
What do you say to folks that, oh gosh, yet another secondary school, Charterhouse is here, Rugby is here, and soon we're going to have Key Academy Secondary School. There are too many schools already.
Too many? Do you think?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh, no.
There are a lot of schools,
There are
I have to say.
There are.
So is the solution yet another school? I'm just playing the, you know, I don't want to say
Is the solution yet
devil
another
because I'm a child
school? Yes, because I think that the offering is needed. As I said, if it existed, fantastic, but we need to demonstrate and prove that it doesn't exist and it is needed. And we do need to develop a secondary school education that has this style of learning, that is exploratory, that is building 21st century skills, that is nurturing the type of skills that are needed in the world in which children are growing up in. So I 100% believe that we do need to do this, and we need to demonstrate it as well. We need to show it, and that's exactly what we've done with our primary. We've demonstrated exactly what it looks like, because often you can say this and say that, right? But then I know that we come from a community, an environment, a culture where people want to touch and feel and see. Like, don't just give me the talk, but show me what this looks like. And that's what we've been showing people, and we want to do that with secondary, in addition to also transforming other secondary school classrooms across the world, across the country, sorry. So for me, it's really, really important that we show what it looks like, and we demonstrate what it looks like, and we explain how children continue to develop this style of learning and continue to go on to university.
Almost like a dream come true, but you know you can't do everything. So it's nice when someone comes into the, you know, sector and is taking, you know, a bit of what needs to be done. So I think it's fantastic.
And that's what we all need to do, right? That's what we want. We want everybody to be taking a piece of it, right? And everybody kind of solves a piece of the puzzle, right? We all come together with our pieces, solve it, and then bring it together and work together to do that.
So do you think government is listening?
I think so. I think so. I think, you know, getting recognition, like being named one of the top 10 most innovative schools in the world, was a big deal for us. And it created a platform that actually allowed people who weren't paying attention before to pay attention. Education, I always say, is a slow burn. It does take some time. People do need to see things demonstrated, ministries, governments, they need to see it.
They need the evidence.
They do. That's fine and that's fair. And so for me, I do think that they are paying attention now. I do.
So I know you're a person of faith. So my next question is, how do you see the work you do along your faith journey in terms of a vocation of sorts. So it is a profession, it is a business, you know, at the end of the day. How do you see that in terms of, you know, a tool for transformation and restoration?
I think I always say to people that, you know, especially given that I had a completely different career before I came into finance, for me to be here right now is because this is exactly where I need to be right now and doing the work that I'm doing and having the impact that I'm having. So I feel kind of, you know, I feel this is purposeful work. You know, I don't see it as a business. I know I have to operate it as it is one. You know, I get that, but I really don't see it like that at all. I always say that what I'm doing now and the work I'm doing now is the most rewarding job I've ever done. It genuinely is incredibly rewarding. Because you are seeing the impact that it's having not just on the children that you're serving, but also the team that you're building. And I feel, and what gets me excited is if I can see this happening within Key, and I think about our tech platform, which gives us even wider reach, just how transformational that is, not just for children, but generations. I feel it's incredibly purposeful. I do feel I'm the right person to be doing it, and I am the one that should be doing it. There was a period of time of imposter syndrome when I genuinely questioned whether or not this is me. My identity was wrapped up in my former world and what I did, and that's what it was. And you know, this has been a huge shift for me. It's for a reason. You know, there's a reason why I actually had that career, and how I'm using all of the learning and the work and the experience, and how that is impacting not just what I'm doing, but the way I'm doing it. So yeah, it's definitely purposeful work. It's definitely where I should be. And I'm definitely doing what I should be doing. And I'm feeling incredibly fulfilled by it. And it's rewarding, I wouldn't say in a monetary sense, you know what education is like, but it's fulfilling. It's the kind of rewards that money really doesn't buy. And I know that sounds really cliche, and I don't want people to be rolling their eyes like, yeah, given all the issues and challenges that we face in this country. So you feel
it's your calling and it's God driven?
100%, yeah.
Okay. So as we wrap up, what is one belief you held early on about schooling and learning that you had to reframe? What's one big dream or challenge you hope this model will tackle in 5 to 10 years? So it's a part A and part B.
Okay.
What have you had
part
to reframe?
A, the reframing is that one size fits all. I don't subscribe to that anymore. I thought that was what it should be. But I do feel that we need to really refocus our learning to be child-centered, and where possible within the parameters that we have, really focus on building, developing and nurturing a child as an individual, not as a collective or an exam number. That's something I've definitely had to rethink about. 5 to 10 years is to really transform the way in which we're teaching children in Nigeria. Children between the ages of 1.5 to 18 years old. So nursery, primary, secondary. Really rethink that whole model and start thinking about nationwide policies, curricula that actually speaks to developing skills that are equipping our children, Nigerian children, for what they need in the world in which they're growing up in.
One last thing. What do you do for fun? What's the last fun thing that you did that you were just like shrieking like a child? That you were actually shrieking like a child?
Oh
like the
my
kids in your
goodness.
school.
What do I do for fun? You know what? I actually feel that I'm quite a fun person. So if you ask me, most of the children on my team, I'm shrieking a lot, just generally throughout the whole day. That's just me. I love music. I love 90s R&B music.
Me too. Me too.
So I am in my element. I am in my element when I am listening to 90s R&B music. So one of my most, I went to a concert recently, Usher.
Was that the one in Paris?
No, it was in London.
Okay.
And oh my goodness, that took me back. That was nostalgic, old school, it was so much fun.
So what's your favorite Usher song?
My favorite album is My Way.
Okay.
My favorite song, I have a lot.
Choose one.
Oh gosh.
I'll say
it. Then we can play it. I'll say You Make Me Wanna. Because it was the first ever concert I went to, and that song feels like one of the blueprints of my childhood.
Dami, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your bravery.
Thank you.
Thank you for your courage. Thank you for challenging the status quo. And thank you for doing it afraid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this platform, and thank you for the person that you are.